Welcome to Idaho in Session, Legislature Live. Idaho in Session is sponsored by the Idaho State Broadcasters Association, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, Union Pacific Foundation, Idaho Association of Counties, Idaho Cable Telecommunications Association, Association of Idaho Cities, and your contributions to the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Yeah.
Do I have a...
Come to order, the Secretary will call the roll.
Bear, Bayer, Bach, Brackett, Buckner-Webb, Cameron, Davis, Durst, Fulcher, Getty, Guthrie, Hagedorn, Hyder, Hill, Johnson, Keogh, Lacey, Lakey, Lodge, Martin, McKenzie, Mortimer, Nonini, Nuxel, Patrick, Pierce, Rice, Schmidt, Sidaway, Stennett, Thane, Tippett, Vick, Work, Winder, Bach, Buckner-Webb, Cameron, Davis, Durst, Fulcher, Lodge, McKenzie, Pierce,
Roll call shows 28 present, 7 absent excused. Senators Buckner-Webb and Senators Pierce have an excused absent. Quorum being present, Senate will advance the second order of business, prayer by Chaplain James Weberding and Pledge of Allegiance. We'd ask our friends in the gallery to rise and join us in prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I pray that once again you extend your guiding hand into the Senate chambers today. Also, as our good senators begin to focus more fully on their districts and exercise leadership there, I pray that you will extend your guiding hand to each one, that they may lead well. Thank you for the opportunities of today. We ask that you bless. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. We'll now be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by our page, Robin Courteau. Robin.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Senate will advance third order of business, reading corrections to journal.
April 2nd, 2013. The Judiciary and Rules Committee reports that the Senate Journal of the proceedings of April 1st, 2013 was read and approved as corrected. Lodge, Chairman.
Report will be filed in the office of Secretary. Senators Cameron and Senators McKenzie will be recorded present in this order of business. Senator Davis.
Mr. President, personal privilege, if I may.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, let me give you the roadmap on how I see the next several days and tell you that at this point in time, majority leadership has some strong confidence on this path forward.
It is our intent today to go into the 10th order of business and pick up the 3 concurrent resolutions that are there, together with the House proclamation in which we honor a dear friend who I note he and family are here today to join us, and we'll return to that later. It is not our intent to go into the 13th order of business today. Remember, House Bill 319 needs to be paired up with another bill that has not currently been introduced. The chairman of our Education Committee, together with other members of this body, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and some members of House leadership, and the chairman from the House Education Committee met yesterday. We had some very sobering and quality conversations into the evening, and we believe that a path forward has been agreed upon, subject, of course, to both committee and Senate concurrence. When the education chairman indicates to us that he has those RSs in the form he's prepared to have introduced, the Senate will go at ease, and the State Affairs Committee, with the permission of our good chairman, will have a hearing in which that RS will be introduced to print. We will return to the floor and introduce that legislation and have it referred to the Education Committee for the Education Committee to have a public hearing. Once we have completed that work here today and this morning, we intend to adjourn for the day. Tomorrow morning, the Education Committee, in concert with their colleagues in the body across the rotunda, will hold a joint committee meeting in which public input will be sought regarding that bill. We will come in on the floor tomorrow mid-morning, in which we anticipate receiving from the committee that legislation. We will look for and find that bill in the appropriate order of business, and it will be our intent to suspend on that legislation still tomorrow morning. Once we have addressed that, and in the event that that bill passes off of the floor of the Senate, the Joint Committee will then meet that afternoon, tomorrow afternoon. I don't want to get ahead of the chairman of our Finance Committee as to when that time will be, and he will notify you and work with the committee members regarding that. We will, of course, have already adjourned for the day. It is my understanding from the chairman of our Finance Committee that it is hoped by mid-morning Thursday that they will be able to have that bill completed. A lot of pre-drafting has been going on and doing what they could do incrementally along the way. When that bill is ready for the floor's consideration Thursday morning, we will come in, we will find that legislation, we will suspend Senate rules on that. At that point in time, once we have completed that work, and in the event that the Senate concurs with that legislation, we will then go to the 13th order of business and send House Bill 319 as well, or at least consider it, and also if it passes, then I believe we will have completed our work and be in a position Thursday to make a motion to adjourn sine die, which I hope this body will favorably support. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to send advance to the 8th order of business.
Without objection, send advance to the 8th order of business. Messages from the governor. Senate's at the 8th order of business. Senator Lodge will be recorded present at this order of business.
April 1st, 2013. The Honorable Brad Little, President of the Senate. Dear Mr. President, I have the honor to advise you that I have signed today and am transmitting to the Secretary of State the following Senate bills to wit: Senate Bills 1018 as amended, 1021, 1059 as amended, 1065, 1068 as amended, 1105, 1106 as amended, 1108, 1122, 1138 as amended. As always, Idaho, C.L. Butch Otter, Governor of Idaho.
Correspondence will be filed in the Office of Secretary.
April 1st, 2013, the Honorable Brad Little, President of the Senate. Dear Mr. President, I hereby advise you that I have transmitted to the Office of the Secretary of State, with my approval, the following Senate bill to wit, Senate Bill 1117. Within the time prescribed by law, the same having arrived in the office of the Governor at the hour of 7:45 a.m. on March 27th, 2013.
Mr. President.
Senator Davis.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the correspondence from the gentleman on the second floor be dispensed with, and the journal show has been read at length. May I explain?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, you should each have a copy of that correspondence on your desk.
Hearing no objections, so ordered, and the correspondence will be filed in the Office of Secretary.
There is no further business in the eighth order, Mr. President.
Senate advance the ninth order of business. Messages from the House. Senate's at the ninth order.
April 1st, 2013. Mr. President, I transmit herewith House Bill 111 as amended, which is passed the House. Alexander, Chief Clerk.
House Bill 111 will be referred to the 11th order of business for introduction.
April 1st, 2013. Mr. President, I return herewith Senate Bill 1189, 1190, Senate Concurrent Resolutions 128, 129, and 131, which have passed the House. Alexander, Chief Clerk.
Senate Bills 1189, 1190, Senate Concurrent Resolution 128, Senate Concurrent Resolution 129, Senate Concurrent Resolution 131 will all be referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for enrollment.
April 1st, 2013. Mr. President, I transmit herewith enrolled House Concurrent Resolution 18 and 20, House Bills 150, 241, 274, 266, 256, 45 as amended, 265 as amended, 273, 178, 290, 321, and House Bill 142 as amended in the Senate for the signature of the President. Alexander, Chief Clerk.
House Concurrent Resolutions number 18 and 20, House Bills 150, 241, 274, 266, 256, House Bill 45 is amended, House Bill 265 is amended, House Bill 273, House Bill 178, House Bill 290, House Bill 321, and House Bill 142 as amended in the Senate, have all been signed by the President and will be returned to the House.
There is no further business in the ninth order, Mr. President.
Senate advance the 10th order of business. Senate's at the 10th order of business, motions and resolutions. The Senate has for final consideration House Concurrent Resolution 21. The Secretary will read the resolution.
In the House of Representatives, House Concurrent Resolution number 21 by State Affairs Committee, a concurrent resolution stating findings of the legislature and authorizing the Legislative Council to appoint a committee to undertake and complete a study of the process of the state acquiring Title II and control of public lands controlled by the federal government in the state of Idaho.
Mr. President.
Senator Sidaway.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Concurrent Resolution 21 be dispensed with, and the journal show it has been read at length.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Senator Sidaway.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of HCR 21.
Hearing no second.
Second, Mr. President.
Been moved and seconded that House Concurrent Resolution 21 is before the Senate. Senator Sidaway is recognized to open debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this HCR is to authorize the formation of an interim committee to study the ceding of federal lands back to the state of Idaho, and to have that committee meet during the summertime. With that, Mr. President, debate is open.
For the debate, Senator Wirt.
President, fellow senators, been there, done that. In 1980, the legislature had a study committee, studied this exact same thing. Nothing has changed. Zero has changed. You might hear later on about some Hawaii case, but nothing's changed. So I would ask you today whether or not you feel that it's desirable to spend taxpayer money on something whose outcome we already know. And I would ask you whether or not, I mean, if there are people that are interested in getting together as a group informally and studying this issue, have at it. But here we're talking about the use of taxpayer funds to do something that was done in 1980. Report was done. David Leroy, who was the AG, and Roy Aguirre, the assistant AG, were involved. And they found the same thing that we would find today. The ideas don't work. This isn't valid. And I don't think we should be spending taxpayer money. Again, if people want to get together informally, form a task force of their own, great. But I don't think taxpayer money should be expended on something like this where we know what the outcome is going to be, or should be if we do the proper research. I'd urge your no vote. And Mr. President, I would request a roll call vote.
There will be a roll call vote
required.
because it contemplates expenditure of funds.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Durst to be recorded present in this order of business. Hearing no further debate, Senator Sidaway is recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, good Senator from 17, for bringing up a couple of those points, because I submit to you a great many things have changed since we last took a look at this, and you know, some of those things we'll talk about in HCR 22 that we're about to debate, but I think that the time and the effort would be well worth it. With that, Mr. President, debate is closed.
Debate being closed. Question is, so House Concurrent Resolution 21 passed the Senate. Secretary will call the roll.
Baer, Bayer, Bach, Brackett, Cameron, Davis, Durst, Fulcher, Getty, Guthrie, Hagedorn, Hyder, Hill, Johnson, Keogh, Lacey, Lakey, Lodge, Martin, McKenzie, Mortimer, Nonini, Nuxel, Patrick, Pierce, Rice, Schmidt, Sidaway, Stennett, Thane, Tippett, Vick, Work, Bach, Durst, Getty, Pierce, Schmidt, there is also a pair vote. Senator Winder voting aye, Senator Buckner-Webb voting nay.
Roll call shows 26 ayes, 6 nays, 3 absent, excused. Majority having voted in the affirmative. House Concurrent Resolution 21 has passed the Senate. Other corrections to the title, hearing none. The title is approved, and House Concurrent Resolution 21 will be returned to the House. And now is for final consideration, House Concurrent Resolution number 22. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Concurrent Resolution number 22 by State Affairs Committee, a concurrent resolution stating legislative findings and demanding that the federal government extinguish title to Idaho's public lands and transfer title to those lands to the state of Idaho. Be it resolved by the legislature of the state of Idaho. Whereas in 1780, the United States Congress resolved that...
Mr. President.
Senator Sidaway.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of HCR 22 be dispensed with and the journal show that it has been read at length.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Senator Sidaway.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of HCR 22.
Senator Fulcher.
Second the motion.
Been moved and seconded. The Senate adopt House Concurrent Resolution 22. Senator Sidaway is recognized to open debate on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I've been approached by several members of the Senate here to not tell about all of the stories that I've had to deal with on the public lands. I'm not going to tell you about the time the forest ranger shot my horse out from under me because my sheep were on the Teton National Forest. But I'm not going to tell you that because it really didn't happen. But he just threatened to do it. So You know, I'm not sure how I ended up with this bill, but I did, and I'll try to do my best to present it properly. And I probably should have last time, but I should state under Senate Rule 39H that I do have a conflict of interest here. If this were to go forward, I run a ranch that utilizes quite a bit of BLM and Forest Service land. But as I started to get into this debate, I was presented with a little booklet here. So when I first got it, this bill was on the board, and I'd glimpsed at a couple of pages, and it's plumb full of information. And over the weekend, I spent a lot of time. I read the whole darn thing, and now I'm suffering from information overload. I don't know what to say to you. There's so much stuff here and what to leave out. But there certainly are I believe, some real opportunities out there to make some movements in this direction, to be equal with other states. You know, I go to a lot of national meetings, and it seemed like I've always served on the Tax and Revenue Committee, and I talk to a lot of people from other states and talk a little bit about their tax structure at times and how those states in the eastern part of the country fund their schools. And they seem to have not very much problem funding their schools, and most of their mill rates are down in that 3 and 4 mill levy, where out here we're in that mostly 12 to 15 mills, and we do struggle, and it is hard, especially for landowners, especially for those counties that are 75, 85, 95% federally owned. And I guess we've become to rely on some of those things like the Rural School Funding Program and the PILT program. They bring money in off of some of those lands in some of those counties to help fund those schools. And before I get too far off here, I just want to read some stuff that I put together and try to keep on track. So lean back and listen. Idaho, the West and the nation as a whole are at a crossroads with respect to ownership and management of the public lands. Re-examination of public land policy has become an economic, education, resource stewardship, and employment imperative. We can continue on the present path of economic inefficiency and bureaucratic dysfunction in which the public lands deteriorate, or we can, through careful examination and good faith discussion, develop a new model of public land management. A model that restores the forests and rangelands, promotes the responsible development of mineral and energy resources, enhances the economy at all levels, and also ensures that these public lands of the greatest scenic and natural beauty are forever protected for the use and enjoyment of all Idahoans and all Americans. The issues are complex and significant, and the resolution requires bold actions that will call into question policies and ideas that have dominated the last few decades. Legal justification for transfer of the public lands into state ownership is based on a history of federal land policy. From the inception of this nation and through much of its history, it was the policy of the federal government to dispose of the public lands both to pay off federal debt and to encourage the settlement of Western lands for the benefit of those states and the nation. Indeed, most of the states east of the Colorado-Kansas state line have very little federal public lands within the borders as a result of the historical implication of this policy. This policy of disposal was very much a part of the various enabling acts that authorized new states to join the Union. Idaho's Admission Act and Constitution disclaimed Title II and agreed to refrain from taxing public lands until the title thereto shall have been extinguished by the United States. Significantly, these terms for disposal of the public lands in Idaho's Admission Act and Constitution are the same terms found in the enabling acts for many states east of the Colorado, where the federal government carried out the timely disposal of those public lands. This disclaimer of title was only intended to facilitate the disposal of the public lands so that eventually such lands would contribute to the revenue bases of federal, state, and local governments. The required disposal of the public lands by the United States over time was a significant benefit of the bargain made by the state of Idaho with the federal government at the time of statehood. In addition to the future expectation of taxable lands, Idaho was also promised 5% of the proceeds from the sale of those public lands held by the federal government, which shall be sold following statehood. The subsequent unilateral termination of the disposal policy to one of permanent retention by the federal government is a repudiation of Idaho's statehood bargain. Lands which, at the time of statehood, were anticipated to be a source of revenue are now largely unproductive. The subsequent actions of the federal land management agencies have reduced the ability of the citizens of Idaho to make a living from the land, denied the nation much-needed timber and mineral resources, and the state's ability to fund education, and have led to poor stewardship of the land. The question of whether the property or the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution permit this unilateral reversal in federal land policy or repudiation of the terms of the state's Admission Act and the Constitution is not resolved, because no federal appellate court has directly addressed this issue. However, the larger and more significant question is whether the shift from disposal to permanent federal retention of a large portion of public lands in Idaho is good public policy today. This is not a new question. In the 1840s and 1850s, Illinois, Missouri, and several other western states repeatedly complained to Congress that they could not educate their children, provide economic opportunities for their citizens, and conduct their affairs as sovereign states because the federal government had failed for decades to dispose of the public lands that comprised nearly 90% of the lands in their states. However, these western states banded together and succeeded in compelling the federal government to dispose of their public lands. Examples of inefficiency and mismanagement abound. These difficulties are not attributable to efforts of capable federal employees, but are instead symptomatic of a non-functioning federal land management policies and process. For example, decades of misguided fire suppression policies, severe cutbacks in timber harvest, and inadequate funding of forest restoration have exposed our national forests and our critical watersheds to risk of catastrophic wildfires. Declining forest productivity and disease and insect infestation. In contrast, forestry efforts on private lands and state lands, and in other countries are regenerating healthy, productive forests and thereby contributing to the economic prosperity. In fact, federal management of the public lands has proven to be costly, inefficient, and at times dysfunctional, resulting in a resource that is both less productive and in environmental decline. The public lands presently do not pay for their own management costs and must be heavily subsidized by the American taxpayer. Present programs and restoration efforts are unfunded, and given the size and the scope of the federal deficit, it is likely that even fewer dollars will be appropriated for the public lands in the years ahead. Meanwhile, federal grazing policies are leading to a general decline in forage productivity and the availability of the land to support both livestock and wildlife. Forest decline, not a new issue. While these results are disturbing, they reflect more symptomatic problems. Federal public land policy is a jumble of inconsistent, sometimes conflicting statutes, regulations, and judicial pronouncements that have evolved over the past century. Funding decisions are uncertain, become ensnarled in the push and pull for routine politics. Appropriations are directed more towards satisfying political constituency than in addressing the environmental and economic needs of the ground. Furthermore, federal land policies change with each new administration, leaving land managers with no long-term continuity. As long as policy and funding decisions are left in the hands of remote officials in Washington, D.C., who have little understanding of the needs and desires of those with local interests who actually live, work, and recreate on the public lands, land policy will continue to be buffeted by political winds. In contrast, bringing these decisions back to the state can better focus management on the most important priority, proper stewardship of the land. Who better to manage the lands of Idahoans who have worked the land for generations and who treasure the great beauty of that land than Idahoans? Federal land decision-making is so burdensome. The courts have made it to where the agencies can no longer function. I'll quit there, Mr. President, with those written notes, and we received a letter from Tom Schultz, the director of the Department of Lands, who did a bit of an analysis on this, and in that letter, it talked about how many lands would be ceded. The state of Idaho has about 53 million acres in the state. Of that 53 million acres, there are some 34 million acres that would potentially be, no, there are 34 million acres that are owned by the federal government. Of that 34 million acres that are owned by the federal government, there are approximately 9,500,000 that are owned by the Forest Service, and about 6,900,000, excuse me, I got that just backwards. BLM owns about 9,500,000 acres. And Forest Service owns about 6,900,000 acres that would be considered for transfer. So there's about 16 million acres that of the total 34,500,000 acres that would be considered for transfer. Things that wouldn't be considered for transfer would be things like the wilderness lands, the national defense areas, the INL, energy, Bureau of Reclamation lands, all of those lands that are now serving a function would not be considered for transfer. Mr. President, good senators, I don't know all the answers here, and I probably won't be able to answer very many of your answers. If you're inclined to debate against the bill, if you have questions, I'll try to answer them, but I don't know how good I'm going to be. There are certain provisions of this bill that I don't agree with at all, but the overall intent of the bill to allow Idahoans to manage Idaho's land sets very well with me. And with that, Mr. President, debate is open.
For the debate,
Mr. President.
Senator Hagedorn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Because the good gentleman from the senator from 35 is kind of limited on this number of stories that he could tell, I thought maybe I would step up and fill that void. Growing up in North Idaho in a small timber community, you either farmed, dryland farmed, or you worked in a mill, or you worked in the woods. That's what we did. My dad worked in Potlatch, at that time it was Potlatch Forest Incorporated, for over 17 years. If you look at your chart here, it was kind of during the heydays of having the federal timber. I also worked in that mill. I pulled a lot of lumber off the planer chain. In fact, that's what made me decide I needed to join the Navy, because a good night pulling lumber off the planer was throwing knots at each other, with people missing all kinds of fingers. It was a really good life lesson for me. It supplied a lot of people at that time a great livelihood. A lot of my classmates still work in the mills up there. But a lot of my classmates aren't working in the mills. They're not working in the woods, because the woods aren't available to work in. There's a lot of biomass in those woods, but we can't use it. We can't get to it. Instead, we let the bugs eat it. We'll let the fires burn it. And then those of us in the valley here suffer from the smoke from those fires. There's a lot of biomass that could generate electricity. For those of you who are thinking, maybe I'm going to vote against this bill, let me give you a reason to vote for it. Every one of those mills, Potlatch Forest Incorporated being one of them, it was the largest white pine mill in the world at one time. That mill is now gone. But there's a huge substation there that they used to bring power in and they used to pump power out. In Council, that mill is now gone. But there's a huge substation there that they did the same thing. There's a number of mills that are now gone all over our state. But there's huge substations where those mills were. And there's biomass in the woods. The state has got about 5 million acres of biomass. For Avista, Idaho Power, for some of those power generation companies to invest in a cogeneration plant to burn biomass, they need at least 20 million acres of timberland to supply them with biomass to be able to make an investment, a capital investment in that cogeneration plant to make that cost effective for those companies. Idaho has 5 million, but the feds have 16. If we were able to get some of those acres of timber, the majority of those acres of timber, and be able to clean those woods up, utilize the biomass and the timbers that are now going to waste through forest fire, we could actually create a ton of jobs and generate some pretty nice electricity that we could sell out of state. A heck of an economic revitalization for those places that no longer have the mills. For those people that are struggling now to try and figure out what to do. They become service economies. Let's allow them to manufacture something again. Getting this biomass off of that 16 million acres would allow that to happen, would allow investments back in our small communities in the timberlands.
and would allow our people who grew up, generations of families growing up logging, would allow them to get back and do that again. This is a good bill. I know we're just sending a message of what we want to do, but there's some good reasons why we should do this. And putting people back to work is a great reason for that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 39H, I declare that I may have a conflict of interest as my employer operates mines on federal land.
It will be so recorded in the journal.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Tippett.
President. To debate the resolution.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I'm cautious by nature. I know that. And I'm particularly cautious when it comes to making major policy changes. I don't claim this to be a virtue. I know it's possible to be too cautious, and I'm afraid that I am at times. I support and just voted for HCR 21. I think it's entirely appropriate for us to further study the issue of title to federal lands being given to the state. But I'm nervous about some of the language in this resolution, probably because of my cautious nature. Mr. President, may I read briefly from HCR 21, which is the resolution we just passed?
Having identified the source, Senator may read.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first whereas clause in HCR 21 states, whereas accurate information is needed before the Idaho legislature can properly address the issue of the management and control of public lands now controlled by the federal government in the state of Idaho, should title to those public lands be transferred to the state of Idaho. And that's where I'll stop reading. But Senators, that expresses my feelings very well. I feel I need more information on this issue before I'm ready to demand, as the language in the resolution states, that the federal government transfer title to all of the public lands within Idaho's borders to the state of Idaho. Now I know and I'm sympathetic to many of the arguments in favor of title transfer to the state. I know that east of Colorado, federal lands are a very small percentage of the total. I understand somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3%. And I know the plan from the beginning was to transfer title of public lands to the states. I know it's more difficult for Idaho to appropriately fund education and other necessary services because of the high percentage of federal ownership of lands within the state of Idaho. I understand that, and those are legitimate concerns. And my perception is that the state of Idaho generally does a better job of managing state lands than does the federal government at managing federal lands. So there's a lot about this resolution that I like, but I feel that there's so much more that I need to know about the issue before I can be comfortable, again, demanding title to Idaho, title be given to Idaho of all public lands within the state. I recognize that the resolution mentions the state would cede certain of these lands back to the federal government, and the sponsor mentioned that, did a very good job of covering that issue. The Be It Further Resolved clause, beginning on line 5 of page 8, urges the United States Congress to engage in good faith communication, cooperation, coordination, and consultation with the state of Idaho regarding the transfer of public lands directly to the state of Idaho. I like that. And it's my hope that they will work with us in a spirit of cooperation, coordination, and consultation. I'm concerned that the language preceding that request in this resolution, demanding that the federal government imminently transfer title to all of the public lands within Idaho's border directly to the state of Idaho, doesn't lend itself to that kind of a cooperative working relationship. I'm not sure I like the clause beginning on line 29 of page 8. It says the proceeds from the sale of any public lands should be distributed in this manner: 5% to the Public School Endowment Fund and 95% to the Bureau of the Public Debt to pay down the federal debt. I have two concerns with that language. First, I worry that the public will be concerned that we're considering wholesale divestiture of public lands. And second, I'm not sure that if some public lands were sold, that 95% of the proceeds should go toward paying down the federal debt, a worthy a cause as that is. Now, I know there are reasons that the resolution was drafted that way, and the sponsor covered that very clearly, but I really wonder if that's the only option we have. In my mind, I may prefer other options. I suspect some will make the point that this resolution doesn't bind us to a particular course of action, and I know that it doesn't. But it is a statement of our intentions and our sentiment to both the federal government and to the citizens of the state of Idaho. I think we need to be sure that it really says what we want to say. Now, Senator, some of you may be able to help me feel more comfortable with the resolution through your debate. I hope so. Otherwise, I'll be voting no on HCR 22. Thank you, Mr. President.
For the debate, Senator Stinnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. Debate against the bill.
You have the floor.
Good senators, as my colleague here mentioned, in 1980, the Idaho legislature asked the AG to study this proposal, and findings still hold true today. Legal impediments remain in adopting this approach. Most notably, it's against our Idaho Constitution. AG Leroy at the time also found that this approach faces a substantial burden of persuasion. Now, we talk about having better use and productivity off these lands, and yet throughout the state, there are several bottom-up collaborative groups finding consensus and improving the management of our national forests and public lands right now as we speak. These efforts are creating jobs, cutting timber, restoring fish and wildlife habitat, and improving public recreation accesses. In the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest alone, the collaborative efforts have treated over 47,000 acres, creating or sustaining over 127 jobs, and have delivered over 11 million board feet to the mills. In the Payette National Forest, over 27 million board feet have been approved. Neither of these efforts, as an example, have faced any lawsuits. These successes are the tip of the iceberg of what is possible if we think differently. Collaboratives have achieved on-the-ground real success, has led to tens of millions of board feet, hundreds of jobs, and protected recreational areas. On the other hand, in a legal debate over the course of the last 30-plus years, there's never amounted to a single tree being cut or a single job being created, and probably only the lawyers are making money at that point. Currently, any benefit from using public lands for personal income, we've got to remember that many of us in the room do receive our livelihood from public lands, as the good senator from 35 had claimed. I don't see that as being a downside. Also, we have to talk about hidden costs that nobody is mentioning. Presently, the federal government has the primary responsibility for investing and prosecuting criminal activity on federal lands and for defending its agencies when they are sued in civil actions. If this proposed land transfer were to take place, the state would be responsible not only for managing these lands, but also for investigating and prosecuting crimes that occur on these lands and defending the many civil suits that will continue to be filed by landowners and environmental interests alike. Are we prepared to spend that kind of money? In addition, costs of investigation, criminal prosecution, and civil defense would be enormous. At a minimum, they would include the cost of replacing BLM and USFS law enforcement officers who conduct investigations, and the assistant U.S. attorneys who prosecute the criminal activity and defend in these civil actions. Federal defendants are incarcerated. The cost currently is borne by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. If the state were to take over law enforcement on federal lands, the state would have to house more prisoners in the Idaho Department of Corrections, which we have already mentioned is already overcrowded. These costs may not be readily apparent to those more related to land use management, but they are no less real, and the state would have to bear the burden. The thing that bothers me, I think, or disturbs me the most is what the good senator from 32 mentioned. All through this resolution, but even in the title, it mentions stating legislative findings and demanding that the federal government extinguish title to Idaho's public lands and transfer the title to those lands to the state of Idaho. Senators, the only reason you'd want title to a land is to sell it. And I don't think Idaho should be for sale. And, Mr. President, I'd like a roll call vote on this resolution.
Senator is supported. There will be a roll call vote. For the debate, Senator Rice.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I think it's interesting that we talk about this. This is a petition to the federal government to do something that that was the norm when Idaho became a state. It was the expectation. That's why the words "until title in the federal government is extinguished" were used. They anticipate that title will be extinguished, not held forever. The federal government was expected to sell those lands. In the statehood, they were supposed to take 5% of that and give it to the use of our schools. We've been deprived of that. The other 95%, they would have been allowed to do whatever they would have with it, including paying down the national debt or using it for the budgetary reasons, purposes of the federal government. We're not asking for a change in that. We're asking for the same thing. We're asking for what the expectations of our citizens were from the time that Idaho became a state. And there's good reason for those anticipations. It was the practice and policy of the federal government. It was inherent in the language used in the statehood legislation and our Constitution. The fact that the federal government has decided not to do it does create a burden on the state of Idaho and make it something of a second-class state. It's not treated the same as the states east of the Colorado line, the east boundary of the state of Colorado. That's inappropriate. The states should be treated equally. It has burdened the poor in the state of Idaho by making it so that they have less opportunity for good-paying jobs. That's inappropriate. It has reduced revenues for schools based on taxation or management of those lands in the future. You don't demand title always so you can sell it. We have lands that we manage specifically for the purpose of income in the state of Idaho to use to fund our public schools. It's not a sole purpose is let's sell it. It's not. Idaho has demonstrated a greater ability to appropriately manage public lands than the federal government has, especially of late. What I haven't heard mentioned is the devastation on our wildlife that comes from the mismanagement of wildfires and our forests. Diseased forests do not support wildlife nearly as well as healthy forests do. There's just a myriad of problems that we've had imposed on our state and on our citizens as a result of the federal government's failure to comply with the policies and promises that were made in creating states. The balance is skewed. This petition to the federal government is appropriate. It is not a threat of a lawsuit. It's not a threat of legal action. It is a petition. asking to be treated appropriately, asking to be allowed to use the resources within our state boundaries for the benefit of our children, our families, all of our people. All of our citizens would benefit. That's appropriate. Doing it from the legislature of the state of Idaho is appropriate. It's a good thing, and I support this resolution.
For the debate, Senator Durst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President, a few points real fast. To start off, Mr. President, I'm watching your hand for that gavel if I start to cross the line. But I guess now I'm giving you a forewarning that you should have it. I guess that wasn't a good idea. My first objection with this legislation is the approach. And I have this about every resolution where we try to tell the federal government what we think they should do. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, I think that we realize when the federal government gets when the President of the United States or those outside of our congressional delegation get a resolution from the state of Idaho, it's about as useful as the empty pop can that I throw in the recycle bin. If we want to communicate something to the federal government, we do it through our congressional delegation. And if we have a congressional delegation that isn't effective at communicating our message, then we should replace our congressional delegation. That's really what this is about. It's about having the process that we use to let that government, the federal government, know what we want, and making that process be effective instead of spending time in the state legislature sending a piece of paper that goes unread and unacted upon. Okay, that was the part where you might gavel me down, Mr. President, so I'm done with that. The second reason I debate against this legislation is because I think that from a recreationist standpoint, from an outdoorsman standpoint, there's no way I can possibly vote for this bill. And let me tell you why. I've been on too many hikes, I've been on too many hunts, I've been on too many outdoor experiences where I've crossed off of federal land into state of Idaho land only to find out that I'm all of a sudden on a private landowner's property. And I can't do the things on that property that I could get away with on the federal property. If you think that from a recreationist standpoint or from an outdoorsman standpoint, that having a patchwork of private property throughout these large, what are now open areas, is a good approach, that's fine. But for me and for my family, I'd rather know that we can go anywhere we want to go in the federal lands and be able to use it and not have to worry about someone having a claim on that land that keeps me out. That's why these are public lands. I mean, I've had a situation, I think many of you have probably experienced this before, where you've been out on a hike or you've been out doing something in the outdoors, and you think you're going through a trail that you're allowed to go through, and you get to a fence. And you say, well, I didn't realize this fence was going to be here. How'd that get here? I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Why would there be a fence here? And then there's a big, huge neon orange sign that says, private property, keep out. No trespassing. Trespassers will be, fill in the blank, shot. When those experiences happen to me when I'm outdoors, I don't cherish those experiences because then I have to make the decision, do I want to hike back 6 miles that I just came to get to this place? Or do I want to really hope I can cut through the corner of this private property and not get shot? Or yelled at, or told that I'm trespassing and having the county sheriff come and talk to me about it? That's a serious question that I think the logical conclusion of this legislation gets us to. A patchwork of land use and ownership that is inconsistent with the ideals of mixed use, of multiple use, of outdoorsmen's rights, of recreationist rights, and the best for the Idaho economy. And I'll be voting no.
For the debate, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good senators. I didn't vote for the first bill. in part because I know that we've studied this issue several times. That was brought up by the good senators from District 17 and District 26, and I'll reference some of those studies in my comments. And I won't be supporting this bill either. So let me just share a few things with you about the Federal Lands Task Force that Idaho assembled back in the late 1990s, and I was actually involved with in the background. In 1996, this legislature passed Senate Bill 1354, which said that to enter into a joint exercise of powers agreement with the United States Forest Service and the Department of Agriculture pursuant to section 67-2328 Idaho Code. In response to this legislation, the State Board of Land Commissioners appointed a 19-member task force and charged them with examining alternative methods of federal land management in the state. And they offered a couple of recommendations for the land board. The first one was that the current process of federal land management have resulted in uncertain decision-making, destabilization of resource-dependent communities, and deterioration in environmental quality on federal lands. In short, the system is broke, and I agree with that, good senators. I spent many years on the ground studying these things firsthand. Their second recommendation is that significant changes to these processes are necessary. I also agree with that recommendation. We do need to change how we manage our lands. The State Board of Land Commissioners recommended that they pursue a pilot project, testing one or more of the action alternatives for federal land management. In 1998, the task force prepared a report entitled New Approaches for Managing Federally Administered Lands, a report to the Idaho State Board of Land Commissioners by the Federal Lands Task Force, July 1998. And it recommended development of pilot projects to test three new approaches to federal land management. The first is the collaborative model, the second is the cooperative model, and the third is the trust land management model. In March of '99, the legislature passed a concurrent resolution stating, we endorse the reports submitted by the Federal Lands Task Force to the Idaho Board of Land Commissioners, support further action by the Idaho Board of Land Commissioners on the proposals contained in the report, and urge the Congress of the United States to pass legislation implementing the recommendations contained in this report. And I want to share those recommendations with you. I don't agree with all of them. The working group recommended the pilot projects for consideration consistent with the task force recommendations. None of the projects involve state management, state control, or state ownership of federal lands. And I have to tell you, I take exception with some of that. I do think that the state can do a great job of managing some of these lands, and I would endorse that model, and I think that's something we should continue to pursue. In terms of their recommendation of the state not owning federal lands, I think there are some candidate acres out there where it would make sense that the state owned those lands and managed those lands, especially where we have intermingled ownerships or maybe some other properties that would be better managed by the state. So I'm not against that. This morning in our local newspaper, our county commissioner out of Clearwater County was reported as supporting a proposed community trust forest pilot project that would allow the state to begin managing a portion of federal land. State-managed land provides revenue on a consistent basis, Stan Leach said, Clearwater County Commissioner, which is what counties need in order to control their own budgets. So they're talking about these pilot projects, these forest projects. And Mr. President, if I could read, I'll pass over that one. Pardon me, Mr. President. Our own U.S. Representative Raul Labrador recently introduced the Self-Sufficient Community Lands Act to set up national forest trusts that would be managed by states, with proceeds going to rural counties. This type of approach has support from other elected officials. An option that was discussed in the Cato Institute is to transfer federal lands to fiduciary trust organizations. The federal government would retain title to these lands, but trust managers would follow clearly defined missions as either market trusts or non-market trusts, to either maximize net returns or to preserve and restore ecosystems or cultural resources. Market trusts would oversee lands with marketable resources and seek to maximize net revenues while preserving
the productive capacity of the land. Non-market trusts would be assigned those lands where the goal would be to preserve and restore natural ecosystems, historic structures, and cultural artifacts. And in fact, in Oregon recently, U.S. Representative Peter DeFazio had a proposal that would turn federal timberlands in western Oregon into trust organizations. Under the plan, the lands would be divided into two, with one half managed to emphasize wildlife and other environmental values, and the other half managed for timber. A timber trust would manage the timberlands to maximize revenues for the counties that have historically received 50% of western Oregon BLM timber receipts. An environmental trust would manage the remaining lands. I think there's some models out there, good senators, that we could promote that would accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish with this resolution. And I would support them wholeheartedly, and I'd devote much time to that. The good senator from 14 mentioned about the mills being gone, and I agree with that. We've lost a lot of infrastructure in that industry. We need more of it. We need to support that. We're going to need the help of everyone to put that back in order. The biomass production that he mentioned, that's not an old that's not a new idea. That's been around for a long time. And again, we need the infrastructure to do that. And that would be a candidate for these types of forest trust projects where we can actually get the state and others involved in the management of the lands. Lastly, good senators, I spent little time studying forest economics and forestry in a couple of institutions of higher learning. And one of the things that you learn very early on in economics is there is no such thing as a free lunch. And that's true in this Capitol building too. So with that, good senators, I can't support this resolution. I do agree with many of the things stated in it, but I feel that there are better models out there for management of our forest lands and rangelands. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Lacey.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good senators. I'm not much of an orator, and I just feel that this HCR 22 is a little bit premature. While it may look good on paper to take over the federal lands, I think the reality with the study group, and I did support the HCR 21 study group, will tell us whether that is right or not. And a little story to go along like this, with this. Years ago, when I was younger and much more ambitious than I am today and had a lot more energy, we used to train racehorses, and we'd run chariot teams in the winter. And my father-in-law, who had a lot more money than I did, he was a dentist, and he decided one year he was going to take world. He went out and bought two really fast horses. One had a 94 speed index, one had a 96. Put them together, and for my team, we were getting some horses, some AA horses. They had in the low 80s, getting them ready to sell under saddle. And so I was riding these. I had 4 or 5 to pick from, and I picked my team out of these horses. And the two I picked, they had full sisters for mothers and the same father, and when you ride them, you really couldn't tell much difference between them. So he bought this really, really nice gray horse and this little bay horse, and he fought them all year long. On paper, they looked good. Both had good speed indexes. He fought them. We changed the tongue on the chariot, changed the wheels on the chariot, everything. He could not get them to run together. Now, my two old little AA horses ran great. In fact, I took a trophy. He did not. And the reason being, while those horses looked really good on paper, one was a 350 horse, run 350 yards very well. One was a 440. One to pull them out of the gate and the other one in on the end. And they were just fighting each other the whole time. I think we're looking at that here. Let's do the study first, and then if the study shows that we can do it better, I think then we should move on to HCR 22, and for that reason I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Keogh.
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to declare pursuant to Senate Rule 39H, I may have a possible conflict of interest. My employers, Associated Logging Contractors, are in the timber harvest business. Thank you, Mr. President.
So recorded in the journal. For the debate, Senator Lakey.
Mr. President, thank you. Senators, if I really felt like response to this bill was truly imminent, then I think we probably are a little premature. I don't think we have the infrastructure in place. We don't have a budget. But that said, I have significant reasonable doubt that the federal government, upon receipt of this resolution is going to run out and start drafting deeds. I think we've got time. This makes a good initial statement. However, 7 pages of whereases, I certainly don't agree with all of the language that is contained in those whereases. But ultimately, I still come down to the fact it's not a question of if the state can better manage those lands. I think that's a given in my mind, that the state can do a better job than the federal government. And I think we do have time to update the study and look at this further before this could potentially even come to reality. So that I'll be supporting the resolution.
For the debate, Senator Schmidt.
To debate the resolution.
Yes, floor.
I'm going to not be voting for this, and actually it's the language that makes me uncomfortable. Page 7, line 38, lands sold to private owners. Page 8, line 28, lands sold. Page 8, line 31, lands to be sold. I think there is a intent pretty clearly in this resolution. I think there's an intent to move public lands to private ownership. To that extent, I love this graph. You can look at graphs lots of different ways. I want you to look at it. We got the green bars, we got the yellow bars, we got the blue bars. Looks like things changed in the 1990s, mid-1990s, in terms of who's selling timber. And I hear lots of stories as to why that happened. But I want you to think about the market. Who benefited? I think the people with the blue bars, the price of that commodity went up for them. I'm not sure that this is the right way for us to go, folks. I'm going to vote no.
For the debate. Hearing no further debate.
Mr. President.
Senator Nuxall.
To debate the bill. To debate
floor.
for the bill. I wanted to, if I could quote out of an email that was sent to me by Idaho County Commissioner Jim Schmelik.
Having identified the source, Senator may read.
In 2012, 1.7 million acres burned in Idaho. 246,000 of those acres burned in Idaho County, where I am commissioner. Using just 50% of normal timber production, this represents 1.23 billion board feet of timber, and at $300 per thousand, this represents $329 million in value. A natural resource value now lost for over 100 years. What was gained by this devastation? Let me tell you what was lost. 25% of the value of this resource would have been $92,500,000 to fund education, rebuild crumbling schools, and fund local services from road maintenance, law enforcement, ambulatory care, indigent care, and many other services provided by local, county, and city governments. A conservative economic multiplier of 3 to 4 could be attached to the total value of the resource, meaning the potential gain to the local economy could have been as high as $1.3 billion in economic activity, revitalizing our depressed economies, creating hundreds of jobs in the communities of Idaho County, and broadening our tax base to further support our educational needs and fund county government. 12.8 million tons of noxious pollutants were released into the atmosphere. And then a conservative estimate, and this is actually from the Forest Service, this conservative estimate of animals killed is between 750,000 to 1 million animals. That's information, especially for environmentalists. These current policies are also creating ecological damage to critical habitat for endangered species and sustained damage to watersheds so critical for every aspect of life on the planet. And can we really wait? If I can read from the Lewiston Tribune from March 31st.
Having identified the source.
Okay. It says here that the Forest Service wants its money back. U.S. Forest Service says automatic budget cuts will require rural timber counties to pay back billions of dollars in federal subsidies they received this year. Forest Service Chief Thomas Tidwell sent letters to four states telling them they need to repay $15.6 million dispersed in January, pay it back under the Secure Rural Schools Act. Counties in Idaho received $26.6 million in the latest disbursement, including $7.6 million that went to Idaho County and $1.1 million to Clearwater County. So are we really going to wait? Should we be waiting now? I urge a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Davis.
Just briefly, Mr. President, I don't know that I can explain my vote in 60 seconds. And the more I hear people speak, the longer my vote explanation is. With all due respect to the minority leader and also the senator from 5, there are other reasons to demand title than to sell property, such as management and finding money for schools and finding money to fund local government. And I find value in those concerns. And it is true to the senator from 18 that trespassers do have limited rights on private property, and I hope it always stays that way. That being said, however, I'm not able to vote for HCR 22. And for me, as I looked at the concurrent resolution, it does contain a few errors in the recitals. I probably don't know the rules and Masons as well as maybe the best that ever stood on this floor, but I do have more than a casual understanding of them. When I look at Masons, section 145, subpart 5, it does tell me that the recitals are not technically part of the resolution. But in this particular resolution, the resolution part draws down by reference some of the language in the recitals, and that's a modest problem for me, but is still a problem for me. For me, I prefer to act on HCR 21 first, which I supported and still do, for many of the reasons that I have heard in support of HCR 22. But prior to an affirmative vote for HCR 22, I'd prefer that we do HCR 21. And then with that information, Idaho can take a correct and thoughtful next step. And because I prefer to defer, I will express that preference in a no vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
For the debate. Hearing no further debate, Senator Sidaway is recognized. Closed debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, senators, for your debate on this bill. I think it helped clarify a lot of things for a lot of us here today. You know, and I love the passion, and it's a good thing I just sat back and listened, because there were a couple of things stated that got us where we are today about the collaborative effort and how some of the people that have worked to, and excuse me for this comment here, but worked to close the public lands to those of us in the state. That collaborative has mostly taken place in our courts. You know, and a lot of us have blamed our judges for some of the decisions that they have made on how we're going to operate and work on our public lands. But as you get to know some of those judges that are forced into those corners and have to interpret the laws that have been passed in this land. It seems to be a lot of their intent is to tell Congress to straighten out that law back there so we don't have to shut this industry down or move these people off of this place. And Congress refuses to act. Now I have to roll my eyes and grit my teeth a little bit. Folks, this is a resolution. This is a resolution. Do you think if this passes this body and goes to Washington, D.C., the next act from Washington, D.C. is going to fill out the title and send the deed to the land, to the state of Idaho? Do you really think that's going to happen? This is a resolution. We're asking the people in this body to make a little stand here. Do you think the feds can do it better than the state can do it? I mean, really, that's what we're asking here. I appreciate the support on the last bill, and we will put together a committee, and we will study this. But like I said, in my information overload, all of those last studies, all of those efforts, everything from back in the 1780s, when those original states were ceded the land, through the 1840s, when President Andrew Jackson mandated that those Midwestern states, I'll call, get their land ceded to them, right on up through to the most recent one where Hawaii got ceded their land to them. There are things that have moved. There are reasons. As you look at those two little charts that I had delivered to you, what happens? You know, you quit cutting trees because environmental communities have taken us to court and got all of those cuts shut down. And what has resulted? Forest fires. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Those same groups do everything they can to remove the livestock from those public lands. What happens? More fires. We don't have little fires like we used to have when most of us were kids, 10, 15, 20,000 acre fires. We have humongous, catastrophic fires, hundreds of thousands of acres. Now those groups are saying, oh, we want to collaborate. And instead of cutting our billion board feet, we're going to let you cut 40 million. It just makes you grit your teeth. You know, senators, I do want to see us pass this resolution. It does mean something to me, and I am going to ask your affirmative vote on it. And look at it for what it is. It's a resolution. What are the chances of anything happening? I think the good senator from 18 probably put it in perspective. But how do we kick back? How do we let them know? How do we get serious about this? What's going on in this state can't continue. And with the expectation that we're going to have revenues to run the state, revenues to educate our children, revenues to do the business of the state, opportunity to come to a state, to build our businesses, to raise our families. When it's all under federal control, it just makes no sense. With that, Mr. President, debate is closed.
Debate being closed. Question is, shall House Concurrent Resolution 22 pass the Senate? Secretary will call the roll.
Baird. Brackett. Aye. Cameron. Davis. Durst. Vulture. Getty. Guthrie. Hagedorn. Hyder. Hill. Johnson. Keogh. Lacey. Blakey. Lodge. Martin. McKenzie. Mortimer. Nonini. Nuxel. Patrick. Rice. Schmidt. Sidaway. Stennett. Thane. Tippett. Vick. Work. Winder. Cameron.
Second call.
Getty. Lodge. There are also two pair votes. Senator Bayer voting aye, Senator Buckner-Webb voting nay, Senator Pierce voting aye, Senator Bach voting nay.
Roll call shows 21 ayes, 13 nays, 1 absent, excused. Majority haven't voted in the affirmative. House Concurrent Resolution number 22 has passed the Senate. The correction title, hearing none, title is approved, and HCR 22 will be returned to the House. And now is your final consideration. House Proclamation number 1. The Secretary will read the proclamation.
In the House of Representatives, House Proclamation number 1 by Ways and Means Committee. A proclamation commending Peter Morrell for his accomplishments upon his retirement from Idaho Public Television.
Mr. President.
Senator Hill.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Proclamation 1 be dispensed with, and the journal show has been read at length.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of House Proclamation number 1.
Mr. President, second the motion.
Been moved and seconded that the Senate adopt House Proclamation number 1. Senator Hill is recognized to open debate on the proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, as you heard in the title here, we are here to honor Peter Morrell for his 34 years of service to Idaho Public Television. We appreciate him being in the gallery along with family and friends, and they have learned more about public lands than any of them ever wanted to know in the last little while. I can hardly imagine the changes that have gone on in the last 34 years as far as television and technology and the content of television. Peter began his career back in 1979 as a young director. Then he was a producer and director, an executive producer, then assistant general manager, and finally general manager. Under his leadership, Idaho Public Television has been the #1 most watched public broadcasting system station in the country, according to Nielsen ratings. And I don't think it's because they wanted to watch us. We haven't been particularly generous with Idaho Public Television's budget, but they've done much on limited resources. Idaho Public Television has won 53 national and regional awards. Now, I think that's incredible, 53. The thing was, that was just last year, just in 2012. It included an Emmy, Edward R. Murrow Award, and if you're like me, I continue to be amazed at the quality of particularly the locally produced pieces that are done, the programs that are done. Now that's the station itself. Peter himself has been given the Silver Circle Award from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the Intellectual Freedom Award, the National Advocacy Award, the Grassroots Award from America's Public Television Stations, and the United Nations Human Rights Day Award. All of this while serving in numerous professional and community positions, taking care of his family, being involved in his community and civic responsibilities. Of course, he's been very instrumental and worked hard with others to produce the live broadcast, the internet streaming of the Idaho legislature. Probably the greatest compliment I could give to Peter actually came from my wife. Thursday evening, we were sitting at a banquet, and we were sitting at the same table with Peter. And he was to my left, my wife was right next to him, and then I was sitting next to Julie. And they visited for a while I was talking politics on the right-hand side over here. She was talking to Peter. And then as we were leaving, walking back to the car, Julie said of Peter, "He's such a nice guy." Peter, thank you for your contributions to Idaho, for your imagination, for your commitment to broadcasting, and for being such a nice guy. Mr. President, debate is open.
Further debate? Hearing no. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would, too, just like to thank Peter for all of his years of service. And I see others in the gallery behind you, and I've been watching your programs for many, many years, since even being a young college student up in Moscow at the University of Idaho, and have enjoyed those programs very much. And your enthusiasm, and I think the love for the work that you do, has inspired me, and it's motivated me to help support public television over the years. And so I just thank you for that and wish you continued success in your future endeavors. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Mortimer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also would like to ask to give my congratulations to Mr. Morrell and let him know that he's made me a convert. You know, many years ago when I came to the legislature, there was always a little bit of a hesitancy to fund and to support our public television. And I can remember never getting so many emails except for when we tried to do that, and the support that has been developed over the years. And then as I've watched the service that it provides, public television provides, in making this process open to our state, to me, that is worth every dollar that we pay to make this process open. And Mr. Morrell is a strong supporter. He's a wonderful man, and he's done a great job. Thank you so much.
Senator Mortimer, I don't want to relive the sins of the past either. Further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Cameron.
Mr. President, just to take a few minutes, and I think the pro tem, the Senator from 34, said it very well. I've had the opportunity to have Peter come before the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, and I know we're not supposed to refer to committee action. I know you've been anxious to bring that, but we will miss his presentation, his enthusiasm, his love for the state, and his love for public television. He has been a great asset to the state and a great asset to public television, and he will be missed greatly. I hope he won't be too far away, because I'm sure they'll need some advice and counsel as they move forward. Just from me personally, I want to say thank you for your service.
For the debate, Senator Bear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to share with you, Senators, if I may, a story going back to my years on the Joint Committee. We were in the annex, so it was only the second year that I had been here, and we had the motion for the public television in front of us, and we were just coming upon those hard times, and we were making budget cuts, and it was a difficult time, and there needed to be an adjustment made at the request of some folks on the committee to adjust the budget down, and I got the nod to do so, and we made a substitute motion and removed several $100,000 from their budget. I thoroughly and completely expected to have an agency head come over and remove my head, but it didn't happen. When it was over, I was expecting to have Mr. Morrell come over and give me a tongue lashing, and instead what I got was a warm handshake, and he said, and I'll never forget those words, he says, "Thank you for the budget, I appreciate it." He taught me a great lesson that day, that in the face of adversity, we treat each other with kindness. Speaks highly, very highly of Peter's character, and I'm grateful for that, Mr. Morrell.
For the debate, Senator Bach.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, fellow senators. Peter, I wasn't going to stand up and talk because I really do want to go sine die on Thursday. but everybody else has talked, and apparently they're willing to take the risk, so I will too. I just wanted to say thank you very much for everything you've done. You've always been a great person to talk to out on the street or wherever we get together, and I think Idaho Public Television is one of the gems of the gem state. So great job, and thanks so much.
For the debate, Senator Stinnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I didn't want to miss an opportunity to say how grateful and what a wonderful example you have set for so many other people with the integrity process and the kindness and quality that we've seen. And anyway, we're eternally grateful for all you've done for us. Thank you.
For the debate, Senator Hill is recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Debate is closed.
Debate being closed, the question is, so Senate adopt House Proclamation number 1. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. The ayes have it. House Proclamation 1 has been adopted. The change of the title, hearing none. House Proclamation 1 will be returned to the House. And now is for final consideration, House Concurrent Resolution number...
Mr. President.
Senator Davis.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. Senate go at ease.
Without objection, Senate be at ease. Senator Hill.
Thank you. While we're at ease, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Peter Morrill. Appreciate him being here. If he would stand. I think his wife had to leave. Linda had to leave. Sadie is, oh, that's Linda there. Okay. That's Sadie. Okay. When you get my age, you got to be right here. Okay. Anyway, Sadie, we're glad to have you here. And friends, colleagues, fellow workers, thank you all for being here to support Peter.
Senator Davis.
Just a quick personal privilege, if I may, Mr. President. First of all, I had understood that Peter was bringing a cake, and that's the only reason I agreed to hear the proclamation. So look forward to you bringing that down. We do intend to take up the next concurrent resolution. I do want you to know that upon the completion of that work, it is our intent to go at ease for the purpose of allowing the State Affairs Committee to hold a hearing. And so I don't know exactly what time that would be, but for those who may be listening in, I anticipate that will be approximately at 11:30 a.m. And so if we can work in that direction, I do not anticipate that it will be a very long hearing. And then we need to return to the floor and print that bill and get it referred to the Education Committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senate will come to order. Senate's 10th order of business has for final consideration House Concurrent Resolution number 34. The Secretary will read the resolution.
In the House of Representatives, House Concurrent Resolution number 34 by Ways and Means Committee, a concurrent resolution stating findings of the legislature and acknowledging the seriousness
Mr. President.
Senator Hyder.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Concurrent Resolution 34 be dispensed with in the journal show that has been read at length.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Senator Hyder.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 34.
Senator Schmidt. Been moved and seconded that the Senate adopt House Concurrent Resolution number 34. Senator Hyder is recognized to open debate on the resolution.
Mr. President and good senators, this is simply an acknowledgement of a very important policy of Idaho, that we recognize that Alzheimer's disease and other related dementia in Idaho affect about 26,000 people in our great state. Idaho has the 5th highest increase in the number of people that have Alzheimer's disease, and 41% of Idahoans living in nursing homes have moderate to severe dementia. I don't know, when we talk about percentages, whether it'll be the right half or the left half of the Senate that acquires Alzheimer's in their future years, but many of us probably will. And it's important that we recognize it. We have an Alzheimer's planning group in Idaho, and specifically, we are resolving that the state of Idaho acknowledge the seriousness of the impact of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias on the state of Idaho and its people, and that we endorse the Alzheimer's Planning Group's statewide plan for Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. With that, Mr. President, the debate is open.
Further debate? Hearing no further debate, Senator Hyder is recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. The debate is closed.
Debate being closed, the question is, so the Senate adopt House Concurrent Resolution number 34. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate has adopted House Concurrent Resolution number 34, and it will be returned to the House.
Mr. President.
Senator Davis.
Mr. President, Senators, we're going to go at ease, but before we go at ease, I need to go at ease for another brief matter, and then we'll make a report back to you. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senate go at ease.
Without objection, the Senate will be at ease. So what's the...
Mr. President, Senators, while we're at ease, I'd like to introduce in the gallery today a good friend and constituent of mine, Arlen Whitrock. He's also a member of the Governor's Economic Advisory Council. If you could make him feel welcome, I'd appreciate that.
Senate will come to order. Senate's in the 10th order of business. Senator Davis.
Mr. President, we'll soon go at ease, subject to the call of the chair. Prior to going more formally at ease, I ask if there are other introductions or announcements.
Announcements. Senator McKenzie.
So State Affairs will meet at least by 11:30, but as soon as we have a quorum, we'll start. So please get down there as quick as you can.
Further announcements. Senator Davis.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. Senate go to accept the call of the chair.
Objection, Senator Beatties. So what's he thinking about when he's coming back?
Welcome to Idaho in Session, Legislature Live. Idaho in Session is sponsored by the Idaho State Broadcasters Association, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, Union Pacific Foundation, Idaho Association of Counties, Idaho Cable Telecommunications Association, Association of Idaho Cities, and your contributions to the Idaho Public Television Endowment. Welcome to Idaho in Session, Legislature Live. Idaho in Session is sponsored by the Idaho State Broadcasters Association, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, Union Pacific Foundation, Idaho Association of Counties, Idaho Cable Telecommunications Association, Association of Idaho Cities, and your contributions to the Idaho Public Television Endowment. Welcome to Idaho in Session, Legislature Live. Idaho in Session is sponsored by the Idaho State Broadcasters Association, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation, Union Pacific Foundation, Idaho Association of Counties, Idaho Cable Telecommunications Association,
Oh, yeah. In the sixth order of business.
And then I'll pick it back up in the sixth and send it to education.
Yeah. Senate will come to order. Prior to going east, Senate's 10th order of business. Senate's at the 10th order of business.
There is no further business in the 10th order, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senate will advance the 11th order of business. First reading, introduction of bills. Senate's at the 11th order of business.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Davis.
I ask unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be read by number, author, and title only, and the journal show they've been read at length.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
In the Senate, Senate Bill number 1199 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to education, to provide for differential pay and to provide for technology pilot projects.
Senate Bill 1199 for Judiciary and Rules Committee for printing.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill number 111 as amended by Agricultural Affairs Committee, an act relating to animal care, to revise a definition, to establish provisions relating to committing torture to companion animals, and to provide that certain officers may take possession of companion animals subjected to torture.
House Bill 111 as amended will refer to the Agricultural Affairs Committee.
There is no further business in the 11th order, Mr. President.
Senate will advance to the
President.
Senator Davis.
Ask unanimous consent, Senate return to the sixth order of business.
Without objection, Senate return to the sixth order of business. Reports to standing committee. Senate's at the sixth order of business.
April 2nd, 2013, the Judiciary and Rules Committee reports that Senate Bill 1199 has been correctly printed. Lodge Chairman.
Senate Bill 1199 will refer to the Education Committee.
April 2nd, 2013, the Judiciary and Rules Committee reports that Senate Bill 1189, 1190, Senate Concurrent Resolutions 128, 129, and 131 have been correctly enrolled. Lodge Chairman.
President has signed Senate Bills 1189, 1190, Senate Concurrent Resolution 128, Senate Concurrent Resolution 129, and 131, and they will be transmitted to the House for the signature of the Speaker.
There is no further business in the sixth order, Mr. President.
Senator Davis.
Mr. President.
Senator Davis.
I ask unanimous consent to advance to the 15th order of business.
Without objection, Senate advance to the 15th order of business. Miscellaneous business and adjournment. Senate's at the 15th order of business. Senator Davis.
Mr. President, if the President give me just a moment, please. Mr. President, Senators will soon adjourn until the hour of 10 a.m. tomorrow. And prior to adjournment, I ask if there are introductions or announcements.
Announcements. Senator Davis.
Mr. President, I move the Senate adjourn until the hour of 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Senator Tennant.
President, second the motion.
Moved and seconded. The Senate adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow. All in favor say aye. All opposed nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.